We are learning to trust the ever-evolving rhythms of nature.
We are committed to embracing our shadow within community
and reclaiming our sovereignty.
We do this together.
That is the way.
Today, I have one of our founding members of the Elemental Movement Project with me, Ayla. Go by Ayla Rose. Is that what I call you if I were to go with your full name?
Yeah, that
Okay.
works. Isla's good too, but Ayla Rose definitely is like the full expression
Awesome.
of it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here with me today to get to know you better from a space of broadcasting out to
Yeah.
the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I guess where I would just dive in is a big question is who are you, Ayla?
Yeah, that's a really big question. So when you first asked that and I closed my eyes and I dropped into what was really true, I am the amalgamation of all my ancestors and all beings that were here before me.
Hmm.
And I am also my own unique expression of that amalgamation of my ancestors and all beings before me. And that in itself is something that I'm constantly experimenting with,
Mm-hmm.
constantly transforming. And in that process of experimenting and transforming, I also find that I'm spiraling towards something that feels like my very like native constitution. What I mean by native constitution is the thing that like connects me to earth and I feel grounded and in myself. And that thing, that constitution, I have yet to find a word for. It's pretty unnameable. And so I'm on this expedition to find words and movements and sounds that can really like say who I am. But in this moment, I am the awareness that I am searching for what that I am is. And so far it's the collective essence of my ancestors and everything that came here before me.
You said that you've made a lot of transformations in this lifetime. I'm kind of drawing upon also past conversations that we've had. But would you be willing to share some of that transformation process that you've gone through in your life?
Totally. Yeah. So this is probably not going to be presented in a chronological order.
That's okay.
Yeah, but I'm gonna pull up the things that feel like really pivotal. So first of all, my parents are immigrants here from the Philippines and built a life out here in the United States. And I was raised in an environment where there was like pretty much no like deeper connection to my ancestral roots and like how it was practiced back in the homeland. There was a definite adaptation of like kind of living in like a very Western viewpoint, and this isn't, I'm talking about this retrospectively. Like I grew up in that, like thinking this is how we were to live, but there was also the blend and mixture of just traditions that we have as Filipino people. And it was also a very unstable, toxic environment. I had a very strict disciplinary father and a mother who was really trying to mother within that strict discipline, but without going into huge detail, like there was just a lot of like neglect and abuse growing up. And so I actually came to realization today that like I was not fostered in an environment that really could recognize like my gifts and my talents because I was living under fear, right? And I think that maybe many of us share this similar story. But I also like as a little one thought that other people could talk to, hear, and sense things that you like don't see in the physical. So there was always like this extra sensitivity already within me. very rich imagination. Like I had a game where I would like run away to the river all the time. I like knocked the screen out of one of the windows in the living room, and I would have like my little backpack with stuff, and I'm like, I'm running away to the river. And I used to start fires on the side of the house, which I got, yeah. But there was like this feeling, this like longing that I needed to go to something. I needed to go to the river.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to tend a fire. I needed to gather and hunt for my food. And I needed to run away from the place that like I was living, that was like confined in this home, to commune with myself in that way. And so that was like me as a little one. So that, there's a lot that I'm skipping over, but what I guess what I want to share is that like there was also like a deep sort of like in my family, we kind of practiced Catholicism, but that wasn't really like imposed on us. We would just go to church on certain holidays. But I had identified myself as a Catholic. So then by the time I hit my 20s, I was already dating my ex-husband at that time. He had a very intense conversion to Catholicism, and he was pretty like anti-church. Something happened, that's his story that I could share later, but he converted, and so did I. And for about 5 years or 5 to 6 years, I was a very devout Catholic. I wore like a veil to church. I went to confession every week. I prayed the rosary like multiple times a day, every day. Sometimes I would go to church multiple times a week. I taught catechism, did retreats. I was like very in it. Really, really in it. And I was also struggling while I was in it. I knew that I was longing for a spiritual community. And I was really drawn to the practices and the rituals and the mysticism. Like I had like an affinity for the mystics. I had an affinity for the rituals and like the devout, disciplined, prayerful life. But the dogma of the church never sat with me, but I adopted it because I wanted to belong. And in that process, like the years coming out, something really like morbid was beginning to occur. And I was experiencing like a lot of night terrors. And there's a very intense experience where one night I woke up maybe screaming, but Robert, my ex-husband, told me that like I was on the wall of where like the head of our bed, like kind of like a spider woman, like on the wall, and there was a crucifix above our head, and I pulled it off the wall and threw it across the room, and I just started like raging like a wild animal. And I was getting very intense night terrors and nightmares of very like obscene situations that felt like, okay, there's something like, I felt like there's something deeply wrong in my spirit. Mind you, I'm a Catholic at this time. So I'm like, I'm probably being possessed. So I tell a priest, this is what's happening. My ex-husband, Robert's like, they're sharing his experience of what's going on. And the priest recommends that I go see an exorcist. So in the Catholic Church, there's like a small number of exorcists appointed within each region or diocese. And so there happened to be one that was close to us. And so we went out to see him, and he did like questions, things like that, concluded that I didn't need an exorcism. I wasn't possessed, but there was probably some obsession, like a demonic obsession. And it was explained that there was perhaps this demonic obsession happened because as a child, like there was a lot of abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. So that made me very much more vulnerable. To demonic forces like coming into my field and pretty much just terrorizing me. And because I decided to become a Catholic, and like, this is through the priest's explanation, right? Like I'm like actively not allowing that energy or like not polluting with that energy. So the intensity of these demons were like growing stronger, and they were like really out to get me, and it felt like that. I felt suicidal. I felt that there was like I was in like these cycles of self-harm, because there was just like this amount of intensity that I just like, I didn't know what to do with it. And so like I would lash out on myself, hurt myself. I would go into these rages, and then I would drop into deep depressions. And, maybe you can call that like bipolar or schizophrenia or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Retrospectively, I feel like I was just like tapping into something energetically that I needed to alchemize. But I really went all the way into Catholicism. And then when that experience happened, I was like crawling my way out of practicing Catholicism because I felt like it was killing me. And it was
So
actually, yes,
go ahead. I was going to ask, when was that the moment where it changed for you?
it literally was like, I got to come out of this.
And how long did it take for you to get out of it after that?
It was like maybe like a 2-year journey.
That was where the shift started to happen.
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of
Wow.
things going on at that time. I'd
Of
already
course.
had 2 of my children at that time.
So you were in it.
I was in it. I was a stay-at-home mom as well. So I'd stopped working and I was going to homeschool my children. I was like very like immersed in that world. And I think I was really trying to adopt an identity because I wanted to belong to a spiritual community. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it really lands in that. But it was
Yeah.
also I was sick. And I'm not really sure if it has anything to do with the church in itself versus just like the experience that I've agreed to like take on, I mean, there's probably so much that I'll like know later on, but the point is that like I went through this incredible, like kind of extraordinary experience of feeling like there were demons out to get me.
Yeah.
And really framing my perspective, and I needed to crawl the fuck out of that.
Wow.
There
Wow.
was one period in that journey coming out of that I was hospitalized. So I was put in a lockdown psychiatric unit. And I remember something had happened and I woke up and I was in a wheelchair being wheeled in. I have stories of people's recollections of things, but there's like a lot of gaps in my memory of like what has happened, and I have the people around me to fill in those gaps. But when those stories are told, I can feel them in my body, even though I don't have the details of things. So there was like severe disassociation from my body. Like I just like came up and out of my body. And I think this is something that I probably started doing when I was really young anyway. It was like coming out of my body through the intensity of experiences I had growing up. This was just like a pattern that I had, a practice that I had. It would just like come out
Wow.
of my body. And part of, coming out of the Catholic Church, part of realizing that there was some like deep issues that I was like battling with, and then like finally coming out of that and moving away from that, like came then another, what I call deep winters. Like I have these, like my kind of annual, like deep winters, or like my Phoenix cycle, where the identity that I formed from that year, or the last few years, really comes burning down. And then like I reemerge from the ashes. And that's been my life cycle. And that's just one story of one experience of doing like a whole, like I went all the way in to this identity of being a Catholic mother, wife, devoted to, the Catholic Church, and literally just like dying, dissolving, burning, like completely obliterating that identity and then reemerging again.
What came from the ashes?
What came from the ashes was a dancing, Ayla. I got tapped back into my creativity really deeply. Someone that was in her body, that loved to dance, that really was connected to music, that was connected to creative pursuits. It was like a return to innocence. It's this part, like the little one, right? My little one, my inner child, that
childlike joy.
Childlike joy. Childlike joy. And also coming with some weird feelings about that. Like, is it okay for me to dance this freely? Is it okay for me to just, spend a few hours like digging into music, even though I have like children that I need to tend to. And so my ex and I had to reorient our lives in such a way where like there was now space for me to drop into things that were actually nourishing for me, that I was like, it's actually okay. Even though I didn't feel like it was, even though like growing up, it wasn't safe for me to be in those things. There was like a reparenting process that was happening. So I arose as a child in this joy of coming back into my creativity and things that made me feel happy. And I was also learning how to do that in a way that felt safe.
Mm.
And so in a lot of ways that impacted the way that I was raising my children, the way that I was showing up in my marriage.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had like a spare bedroom in our house, and like I turned it into like this massive like craft room, and I'd lock, I'm like, okay, dad's home, you're taking care of the kids. I'm locking myself in this room for hours and I'm just gonna create. I taught myself how to sew. I taught myself how to draw. I taught myself how to like work with yarn. And I was just like creating all of these things
Mm-hmm.
for nobody except myself. It was just like splattering everything on the inside.
Yeah.
Into these artworks and pieces of expression that like I didn't know what they meant, but they were communicating something to me. It's like I could see my insides out. And I actually feel like self-harm was sort of that, but like on the shadow side. Because I used to cut, and it was like a desire to see like that my pain was real, because it was invalidated a lot and gaslit. So if I cut, then I could see it. So, but now it's like when I create art or when I dance, it's like, it's right here, right now. What I'm feeling is right here, right now. Like there's nobody that can't tell me that that's not happening, because like I'm experiencing it like right here, right now. I'm drawing it. I'm dancing it. Like I'm manipulating materials with my hands to like see it. I'm creating altars like in nature and in spaces where like the emotion is like in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, now I can see my insides reflected back that way. There was like definitely a longing for just growing up, like, do you see my inside, the way that I see it? Are you going to tell me what that is? Right. Yeah. I'm going to pause because I just feel like I went through this like whole
It's a lot.
one Phoenix cycle journey.
Yeah. So that must have been really hard coming out of that more repressive culture that you were in, and then like emerging out of that, and you're still a mother, you're still a wife, you still have responsibilities, but you're like, the shackles have been removed to some degree too.
Yeah.
Right. But then also you have these earthly responsibilities that you have to maintain that. And so there must have been a big challenge in there.
Yeah.
Of balancing that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
keeping that, I guess, in the right way, I would say, in terms of like almost like an eightfold path Buddhist perspective, right? Of just like, what is the right way to do things in service of yourself, but also in service of those that you're responsible for.
Absolutely. Very, very perceptive for you to name that. You just feel like that's pretty much my lifelong dance, is to balance polarity and being genuine and authentic in that. And there's a lot of opinions out there on like how to do that.
Yeah.
And I've learned that those are good like jump off points to kind of consider someone's opinion or method or whatever prescription. But at some point, you're going to have to find what your way is. And there's like this saying that I see kind of everywhere, and I think you probably know this, but there's like a second part to it that like, it's like, actually just found this out recently, that it's the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah.
And then the second half of that is, when the student is ready, the teacher will disappear. And so and I feel like this is just a lifelong like dance that and movement that I'm doing, is like, really, what is the middle path between what is already established, what is known, what is safe, what is the structure, And then what is it like here that's like coming in that feels unconventional, like really edgy, that is like almost like it seems impossible. And how do I walk between those worlds in a way that feels like a true expression of who I am? And also holding space for and discerning the myriad of ways that people say you need to do that. And also finding my voice and saying, this is the way that I want to do that. And being with the reaction, the responses of the people around me to that. Like this is that constant like relational dance. And so like there's this thing I practice, or not practice, but I study a little bit of human design. And one of the things in my human design, my incarnation cross is what they call it, is I have the incarnation cross of tension. And what that means is that everywhere I go, I will create a level of tension, and I will experience a level of tension because it's here. I'm like here to help fortify something that like right.
I love that. And you know what, you mentioned that, and having, you've come into my life as a friend and as a business partner now, and other forms too. And I felt that now as you mention it. And like I think
Tension.
we have felt that as a
Yes,
team. Right?
totally. Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty rad.
I'm glad you say it's rad, because like, carrying it, it's like I'm again like dancing with, do I really come with my full edge that I could?
Yeah.
Do I like soften it a little bit more? So like I'm always kind of like feeling into what that is while staying what's true to me. And sometimes what's true to me wants to be more edgy. Sometimes what's true to me like wants to be super soft. I can't ever tell you what is more dominant, because it is shifting. It is always tuning and resonating with the environment all the time. And the environment is always changing. There's so much input happening. I'm looking at you, watching your body language. I'm like hearing the sounds in the house. I'm feeling what's happening here. Like I have this like incredible like sensitivity to all of those things. And I am really like, okay, what is the truth here? Versus what do I feel or think that you need to hear, or what I think someone else needs to hear to drive for a certain result. And I think there's a distinction, a really subtle distinction between those two, that I'm always dancing with.
So those two things being what you feel needs to happen and what this person may want or they might need.
Yeah. Maybe
So
we can call that people pleasing, or I don't know.
Yeah. Or manipulation.
Or
It could be either one.
manipulation. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I hear all this that you're saying, and I like feel into it, I mean, for one, I hear is like you listen a lot, and you have an immense amount of sensory information that you're taking in and that you're aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds almost overwhelming to me. And so I asked, do you get overwhelmed with all that information and like what you take in?
Yeah, I mean, I have tools to work with that now, and I'm really grateful for all of that. In the past, it wasn't like I would have like nervous breakdowns in like crowded places.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to have a lot more quiet time alone. So here's a story. I was driving down in Mexico. I was in the car with my ex-husband, his sister, her friend, and his dad, and our German Shepherd at the time. We're driving to Baja. And we're in a van. And so everyone's talking, interacting, there's scenery to look at. And I like was so overwhelmed by like the amount of like proximity to all of the people and all of the stimuli. And I felt like I couldn't hear myself. I felt like I didn't know what I wanted. I felt like I couldn't like access like if I needed to go to the bathroom or not. It was like so intense. And it was more like, can you please take care of like what you need? Like, let's go get some food if you're hungry. Like I started sort of like thinking that if everyone could take care of themselves, they would calm down so that I could be calm. There was also this other time where I went on a road trip with like 30 people on a ecstatic dance bus. We like went through all of California and like danced at all these different places. And I remember we had parked the bus at like a lake somewhere, I forget. And we were like circling around to like drop in. And the facilitator had asked, like, does anyone want to share anything? And I was like, this is cool that I'm traveling with all of you, but I need everyone to leave me alone for the next 3 hours. I'm going to go in my tent and I don't want anyone to ask anything about me. Leave me alone. Because I was just getting so overwhelmed with the amount of things that were happening around me. But now where as it stands, like I feel extremely grateful, just like walking the path of someone that's like listening to cycles and listening to her womb, and the teachers that have like helped me and accessing that information so that I can drop into this space, and that's where I land my consciousness now, is just like dropping into my womb space and where am I, how do I orient myself, where am I in this phase? And that gives me context and like a lot of relaxation. And then I'm like, that's none of my business. All of this other stuff is none of my business at this time if I'm focusing right here.
Wow.
And that tends to take care of itself. And there's a lot more trust and surrender that happens when I really drop my consciousness into my womb space. But yeah, before, no. And so I guess I would say is that like really coming home to my body has been like really, really, really fucking key in all of this. Otherwise, I'm just out there just like, everything, yes, no, yes, no, overwhelmed, inundated by all of that.
So I want to share a story about you, one of my experiences about you, and then I have a question for you.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
So I haven't known you from like on a closer level for very long. It's only been a few months really.
Yeah.
But it's been a really lovely getting to know you better. And you came over for dinner to join my wife and I for dinner, you and your man. And you did something that had such a strong impact on me and such a strong impact on Kendra, my wife. That was just incredible. And it has ripples of that have like reverberated out into other aspects of my own life. And that what that is this very I don't even say confrontational, but there's like, it was not negative, it was not positive, it just is. Right. And it was this boundary setting. And we had been having this amazing exchange for maybe 2 hours, right? We're talking, we're connecting, we're dropping in, we're feeling very like, it was just a lovely evening. And then you went off to go pee and you came back and you're like, I need to go. I peed and my body is telling me I need to go. So I'm going to end the evening now.
Yeah.
And it was so like, normally if someone were to do that, I would feel like I'd feel like a pit in my stomach. Oh, did I do something wrong or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I'm a people pleaser. I like, but the way in which you did it was so matter of fact. It was so like, I'm connecting with me and this is what I need. And it was so amazing because it was like, I felt in the spirit of like, for everyone, it was the perfect time to end the evening. And there wasn't like this, like, we're just like continuing and almost like overdosing on social connection. We got the perfect dose. And then it was like, all right, let's end it there.
Yeah.
And you allowed for that to happen with that very like connected to your body thing. And it was,
wow.
Since then, I've experienced that within myself. And I've seen my wife do it too.
Oh, so cool. I love that.
And it was like, oh. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I wanted to share that. And I guess the question that comes from that is, when did you develop this connection? And I'm sure it's an ongoing development, right? It's probably still in process on some degree. It always is, right? But when did you develop this ability to just be super tapped in to your body and what your body needs?
Wow, that's a great question. So you're right, it had been developing over time, but I was probably not conscious. I know I wasn't conscious of it, but it came crashing down just shortly after my mom had passed away. And it showed up on the dance floor. it showed up when I was taking myself out for my own nature walks. It showed up in a space where like there was no need for verbal interaction and just space to really be with what was really there for me, feeling wise in my body, all of that. Like, and I decided not to go to counseling or therapy or anything like that. And I found that it was being with the trees and being with the water and being on the dance floor was like, that was my therapy. And it was somatic, it was a deeply somatic experience of letting myself really rage and fall apart on the dance floor and letting myself rage and dig a hole in the dirt and scream into the earth. Let myself run to the ocean and cry, letting myself experience so much joy in moving my body freely and like remembering like parts of my life that maybe I had forgotten, but like feeling the wisdom of my body, like moving it through an expression that is my own expression. And as I continue to like immerse myself in being in relationship to nature and being in relationship to moving my body, how my body wanted to be moved, I was like, oh, okay, like this is what feels good and this is what doesn't feel good.
Mhm.
And what I find is that my mind has been conditioned to say what feels good and what doesn't feel good, right? And so that was actually where my work lies, is developing allyship with my mind and my body,
Mm.
them becoming married essentially and working in
Yeah.
partnership. Like body is feeling this, mind's like, okay, what do we need? Not
Mm.
like, here's the story of what happened, which like that comes in all the time, but it's like actively like, I need a pee. Go to the bathroom. Okay, I think I'm done. Okay, that's fine. Let's go. Like that to me is also inner child work. That to me is reparenting. That to me is saying the child's like, okay, like I'm tired, mommy, daddy. Okay, let's go to bed now. And not forcing more, pulling more out of what's needed or not needed, and just like showing up for that, to me also establish safety and trust. My body's like, yep, you got me, we're okay, and we can start to regulate now, or just do what we need to do. And so yeah, I think that like really is the thing, was just being alone, feeling the whole spectrum of this human experience in this human body in a space that can hold it. And what I want to say too is, as much as like I'm someone that enjoys my alone time, I also have like the dance space in community, or the chosen community, as is the next level of healing that I'm like able to tap into, because I'm being witnessed in this and I'm being accepted as who I am in this. And that's like a huge thing, right? Is, am I accepted as who I am? Even though I'm tumbling and falling and thinking I'm getting it right, but maybe I'm not, am I still being accepted? And what can I also resource within my community? And I really found that through the dance community that I was around during that time after my mom had passed away. It's just like, these were people that could be with me in a wordless space, but we could move bodies together, have this deep communication, and this like meeting of, I see you, you got this, I got you, I'll see you again. It was cool. It was really cool. So yeah, I guess I would like I would answer your question that way, listening to the cues of my body.
Wow. Yeah, I can't help but, compare my own experiences with yours in some way. And where I see a great difference is, for me, and a lot of the learning in my abilities and my gifts, or relearning too, has been in large part through human teachers. And it sounds like for you, unless I'm, making an assumption that's incorrect, it sounds like there wasn't so much human teachers as it was more a listening to like nature, and a listening to other things.
That feels really accurate. That's beginning to shift now, but most of it, yes, definitely. Just listening, being in my experience and being in nature in my experience. I think there was something that I've been working through, is that like humans are not safe, because like that was the environment that like I was raised in.
Yeah.
And so I've actively had to like move through that and
It
find
sounds like
safety.
you've learned a lot without
Yeah.
that human teaching.
Yeah. And I'm not a human alone on a planet, We're here,
Yeah.
we're here doing it. We're
Yeah.
here together doing this.
Yes, we are. I guess where I'd like to go is, what does your current practice look like? And that can be your personal practice. It can also be like professional as well. What does it look like for you now?
Yeah. So Eldon helped me really find this term. I really feel like I'm like an everyday esoteric. And so I walk in between the worlds of what one would perceive and call like magical and spiritual,
Hmm.
and then this world of like the more physical, mundane, practical. And inside of that, my practice has been one of adopting a cyclical consciousness. So observing the inner cycles and the outer cycles, and every single thing that I do, every endeavor that I go into and relationship that I go into, I'm like inside a cyclical consciousness. And to me, that it means like really listening and respecting and seeing that there is like a cycle in which spring is coming,
Hmm.
being in spring, going into summer, dropping into fall, and then really deepening into winter. And so my practice of that is inside of when I work with women and their bodies in their womb space. And that's been a much newer thing in like the last year, like really, really committed to working within the womb space and reclaiming that space and
Mm.
accessing power and sovereignty. That's a practice that I have. I work with a lot of divination tools. So astrology and tarot are like the main two that I work with. These are tarot's like doors that I open and I look and I commune with the archetypal energy that's inside of it, much like astrology. Like I'm sky watching and I'm communing with these celestial beings that are around us that have influence, and I'm listening to the impact that they have, and I'm learning how to be in communion with them. And then I take all of that, and it's like it has a direct impact on all of my relationships, from my children to my partnerships to my friendships, my community and beyond, is really listening to what cycle we're in, what phase are we in within that cycle, and being in flow with that. I often think of, I don't know if this is out of the Tao Te Ching. I don't think it is, but there is this story. No, it isn't. But there is this story of this man looking at a river, and the gosh, it's not really like a story. It's more like a teaching. It's like a teaching of like watching the river to understand how to flow with it, right? Like which direction is it going versus like how, versus trying to control it, versus trying to like go in and manipulate it. I wish I had the story retained, but the point that I'm driving at is that like I'm finding myself always in a place of like, where am I in relationship to this flow and how can I move with it?
Mm.
And so that's like painting everything. And that's my practice. That is my practice always. And when I can feel like a little like I'm going over a rock or going in a different direction, that's sort of like that feeling in the body, like I gotta pee or I gotta go or I need to stop, let that cycle by.
So you're really operating from a place, again, it keeps coming up to listening and to observing and to not coming from up here, but somewhere where it doesn't arrive first from thoughts.
Which is challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially in this world, right?
Right.
I feel like that way of being is not as respected in this culture that we find ourselves in.
Sure, I feel that way. I feel that way for sure.
And we definitely have this society that's very, very young, very masculine, very pragmatic. We want to get things done. We have ideas, we act on them, science, and you're coming up from a place that's more of like feeling.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought that in, because like one of the things that I've been studying deeply too is just how does that more yang and the more yin, how do they actually operate and work in communion together? I've spent like a portion of my life feeling really angry at that more driven, linear, go get it way. And I feel that that's still there. There's some fuel in me, and that's part of why I choose to also work the way that I do in a much more yin way.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to live my life trying to be in opposition to that. I don't feel that's actually the way. And one of the things that I've learned is the yin expression reveals. I reveal what's here. Yang receives that in their container, and they're like, okay, then this is where we can go next with that. Here is a possible direction after yin reveals. A clean expression of that. And I feel like that happens always inside of us. It's like when my yin body goes, we need to pee, my yang body is like, yeah, let's go pee, and it's time to go home. And it's interesting because, and this is something that I want to name here, because being the female within this founding group with, all of you are men.
Yeah.
There's definitely just the mind has a lot of stories to work through around, like, are you all able to like meet me where I need to be met, or am I going to try to attempt to meet you where I think I need to meet you? And it's been absolutely surprising every single time to find what middle feels like. And I feel that there is like an equal like receptivity, and also like, okay, that's a directive that comes from all of us. Like I feel the expression of yin and yang in all of us very like naturally. And so like, in a lot of ways, I'm healing that part of myself too. That's like, I can't be a woman in like a male dominated space, but it's happening.
Yeah.
And so these are the things that we've been talking about as a society. It's like, what would that look like? And I'm like, well, it's happening. We're working it out right now.
Small scale, but it has to start somewhere, right?
Absolutely. And so, yeah, I'm feeling really grateful to be able to experiment that, with.
You got your work cut out for you, though. There's four of us men and one of you right now.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful that you all are willing, from what I can glean, that there's some willingness. But yeah, definitely. I'm thankful for that cross of tension that I bring then.
It's necessary, and it's been really amazing bringing you into the fold, because it's created that, it's rounded things out in a way that is vital for the growth of this in a balanced manner, right? Speaking to that essence of the middle way, right? Different middle way, but the same at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that I've brought some like roundedness to that.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot so far. This idea of your cycles of the phoenix and these transformations that you've gone through. I think it's very powerful. And we've also talked about your process a little bit, and also some of the abilities that you've cultivated within yourself, and how you've arrived in them, in your power. And I guess before we end, I just want to, like, is there anything else you'd like to share around those topics, or around something else entirely different?
No, nothing's coming up for me actually at this time. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's all right.
Yeah.
There will be many more conversations had. And I really look forward to having, conversations with other people too, that are, in line in some way with our thinking, and also not in line in other ways.
Yeah.
And really diving into these certain ideas and having you there, bringing the energy that you bring.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited about that too. Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to chat with me. It's been
Yeah.
really lovely.
Yeah. Thank you for your listening, actually. I felt like I had space to tap into what was like really there and slowly move into like what feels true for me to say versus like, well, I better say it with punch and it's got to land somewhere and it's got to hit. I noticed that when I get into that way of thinking, it actually kind of robs like the essence of what I want to bring forth. And so thank you for creating the space for me to drop into that.
It was easy to do. So
Yeah. When you're ready to begin your journey, visit elementalmovement.life. We'll see you there.